This is Paul Turner, the Immigration Barrister at Imperium Chambers. Thank you for tuning in. If you've got any sort of immigration problem, please get in touch with me and I'll do my best to help you. Today I'm going to be able to share some rare but good news as to a new immigration route in the United Kingdom for workers originating from outside the United Kingdom. The Home Office has introduced this route for high growth businesses to attract talent in the United Kingdom, not surprising given the number of vacancies. This route offers sponsors the flexibility that rapidly growing organisations need and that highly talented migrants want. The question which arises, what actually is the scale-up visa? It doesn't say very much, but I'll go on. A scale-up is basically a high-growth company, a start-up in its initial phase, in line with the definition adopted by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. The Home Office defines scale-up sponsors as organisations that meet both of the following criteria: annualised growth of at least 20% over the previous 3-year period based on employment count or turnover, and a minimum of 10 employees at the start of the relevant period. In essence, there are 2 stages after which the applicant can apply for settlement in the United Kingdom. Sponsored stage of 2 years, unsponsored stage of 3 years. Applicants entering the route at all must make a sponsored application, or entering the first route, must make a sponsored application with a valid certificate of sponsorship from a qualifying scale-up sponsor. The initial visa lasts for 2 years, but the applicant must work for the specified sponsor for only the first 6 months. After that, the worker can apply to extend their visa, provided that their previous earnings meet the necessary income threshold. The key advantages of the scale-up visa route are: scale-up sponsors are only required to sponsor workers for 6 months. After 6 months, a sponsor's administrative duties fall away, and that can be quite a good thing. There is no immigration skills charge, which saves sponsors up to £5,000 on visa fees. Flexibility for workers. After the initial 6-month periods, workers have the option to either stay with the sponsor or leave to work elsewhere. This introduces, or should introduce, a relatively mobile group of workers to the United Kingdom labour market who have the option to work at organisations that may not necessarily have a sponsor licence. What can you do on a scale-up visa? The applicants will be eager to know what they can do on this visa. Successful applicants will be granted permission to reside in the United Kingdom and can work in sponsored employment for at least 6 months, and may also take on additional work during this period. They can then leave their sponsor after 6 months to work anywhere, including for organisations that do not have a sponsor licence. They can take on self-employed or voluntary work. They can also study, subject of course to the ATAS requirements. Applicants can also, and this is a very important thing, they can sponsor dependent family members, so it's not going to separate families. However, applicants cannot access public funds, and the professional sports restriction remains in place, so that's not going to apply to many people. Although the rules still mention the police registration system for some nationalities, this requirement is apparently on its way out. The next question is, how do you apply? First, get a scale-up licence in place. Sponsors, and this relates to the sponsored route, sponsors must hold a valid sponsor licence for the scale-up route. Those who hold a general sponsor licence already will need to add on the scale-up visa aspect to their licence. Sponsors can use their portal to add the scale-up limb, but do not need to submit additional supporting documentation, as the Home Office will instead check with HMRC directly to see whether you do meet the requirements. Getting a scale-up sponsor licence is not particularly difficult, but if you want some help, I can help you with that. Sponsors should also ensure that their HMRC filings are up to date. There aren't gaps in their HMRC records, and that all PAYE records in use are on the sponsor licence before applying. One will recall all the problems with the Tier 1 sponsors and entrepreneurs. This avoids that. The Home Office will check The sponsor is solvent, has at least 37 months worth of HMRC history and a minimum of 10 years employees at the start of the 3-year period. The scale-up test can be passed by one of the following. Employee growth. Average employee count in the most recent 12-month period must show, as I've mentioned, a growth rate of at least 20% per year since the start of the 3 years. Turnover growth meets or exceeds the 20% growth in the most recent 12-month period. So there is some flexibility there. Unfortunately, unlike other limbs, the scale-up licence cannot be renewed beyond the 4 years. The Home Office classifies this as a temporary work route, so once a scale-up limb is added, this is valid for 4 years. But as I've mentioned, there is flexibility for workers who come in on it to switch out of or not work for their sponsor after 6 months. To continue, however, sponsoring workers, the Home Office expects sponsors to be licensed under one of the other sponsor routes. Presumably the Home Office envisages only needing this limb in place for a high growth period. Applying as a sponsored scale-up worker, what do you need to do? To qualify for the sponsor stage, an applicant must score, and we are under the points-based system, 50 points, which they can get by meeting the following requirements. Certificate of sponsorship issued by an A-rate scale-up sponsor. This must confirm the details of the employment, and they will be employed for at least 6 months. Role at an appropriate skill level in the appendix skilled occupations. Note that this is at the moment RQF level 6 versus RQF level 3 for skilled workers, so it's a higher grade. Being paid the appropriate salary. This must be the higher of the general threshold of 33,000, the going rate for the applicant's code, and £10 an hour. If the applicant meets the requirements for the sponsored application, the Home Office will grant entry clearance or permission to stay for 2 years. The applicant must then work for the sponsor for 6 months, as I've mentioned. If the worker wishes to change employer, sponsor or job during the initial 6-month period, they may need a new certificate of sponsorship and apply for as a sponsored worker all over again. You can also apply as an unsponsored scale-up worker, and this might be more attractive for some people. To qualify for the unsponsored stage, an applicant must already have permission as a scale-up worker, have PAYE earnings in the UK equivalent at least to £33,000 a year during at least 50% of their permission as a scale-up worker, e.g. 12 months for someone that has 2 months, been granted 2 months previously. If the applicant meets the requirement for the unsponsored application, the Home Office will grant permission for 3 years. It is worth noting that there are strict rules on the type of income that can be counted. In short, the Home Office is looking for a basic gross pay as recorded through PAYE. Applicants cannot count self-employed income, although they can work as self-employed under this route, or overseas income or savings. In addition, you cannot average your earnings over the whole 12-month period. Where gross earnings are below $2,750 in a month, this cannot be offset by earning more in other months. And although there is no limit on the number of jobs that applicants can take, if an applicant is claiming earnings from different employments, this must be from different months. There is a bit of leeway, so periods of time on statutory parental leave or sick leave are treated where the income requirements are met, so there is some flexibility there. The Home Office is moving towards a system of checking PAYE earnings directly. As anyone will know, there was a huge problem where they didn't check with HMRC. Practitioners may therefore want to check PAYE earnings on the HMRC portal and or provide the pay slips that are relied on before they actually make the application. There are some other important considerations to be taken into account. All the other usual rules apply at the application stage here, which include, and they're not surprising, but I'll mention them anyway. Appendix English language can be met. Applicants must prove that they have English language skills requirement at B1 level or above in all four components: speaking, listening, reading and writing. It's to be expected for appendix finance can be met. The applicant will need to show at least £1,270 unless the sponsor is certifying maintenance on the certificate of sponsorship at the sponsorship stage, or they are applying for permission to stay having been in the UK already for 12 months. The grounds of refusal requirements in immigration rules at Part 9, grounds for refusal do not apply in this case. Whether the criminal record certificates needed for apply for what are needed will also apply for different SOC codes. Whether letters regarding any recent scholarships are needed, whether the ATAS requirements in play, and a TB test must be taken if applying from an Appendix T country. Now, turning away from what the applicant needs to do, what are the sponsor's obligations? Given that the route was meant to reduce the administrative responsibilities on the Home Office, the guidance has been updated to take into account the changes that the scale-up route includes. Of note, sponsors need to report the date that the scale-up worker starts working, not surprising there. Sponsors must notify the Home Office if the worker fails to start, is absent from work, or there are significant changes to the nature of their work or salary. Sponsors, however, do not need to notify the Home Office when the scale-up migrant leaves. In fact, the sponsor's responsibility for the scale-up worker automatically ends after 6 months from the valid date of their visa. The scale-up worker can stay on with the sponsor or can change employment without needing to make a new application for permission to remain in the United Kingdom. Although the sponsor doesn't need to report on individual migrants after the 6 months, other obligations such as a change of address or change of ownership all remain in place. Now, the question then arises, and you'll forgive me for going on, but I thought I'd cover it. Applicants will need to use the form Scale Up visa if applying from overseas, or Scale Up if applying in country. The form itself is fairly straightforward and similar to a skilled worker application form. It is worth gathering the usual data like such parents' details, travel visa details and employment details before filling in this form. Switching provisions enabling a change of visa are similar to other work routes. You can switch from within the United Kingdom to a scale-up route provided you're in the United Kingdom lawfully and not last granted permission as a visitor, short-term student, parent of a child student, seasonal worker, domestic worker or outside the immigration rules. The good news is, apparently, decisions will only take 3 weeks on the standard service, but there will also be some options, apparently, for priority services for those that need it. The fees, coming to what might be the crucial point, are far less than, say, of those who are applying to join somebody in the United Kingdom as a spouse or parent of a child. And they are as follows. The licence fee, temporary worker licence fee application, is £536. The certificate of sponsorship for a temporary worker is only £21, and the application fee itself is £715. Plus, of course, you'll have to pay the immigration health surcharge. As I've mentioned before, there is no immigration skill charge, which will save potential sponsors a large sum of money. And finally, the good news, after you've listened to me to the end, is that this is a route to settlement in the United Kingdom. After 5 years continuous residence in the United Kingdom, scale-up applicants can apply for indefinite leave to remain, provided they meet all the relevant requirements. As with other work categories, they can combine time with other work routes such as skilled worker, so you can aggregate your time. Essentially, to be eligible for ILR, they must be in employment and earning a gross annual salary of $33,000 via PAYE, both at the date of application and for at least 24 months out of the 3 years before applying for ILR. As with any extension application, or this particular one, this must be PAYE employed income. Applicants cannot, and I cannot stress it enough, count self-employment income, savings or overseas income, although they can be unsponsored at the date of application. Although this route promises significantly less red tape for sponsors, the other side of the coin is that sponsors will find that they hold less control over the workers that they recruit, because their obligations are only for 6 months and the worker can change after 6 months. The requirement to remain in PAYE employment earning above a particular income for a particular period may involve more work for individual migrants. Employers should consider whether they monitor salary levels, absences and periods of unpaid leave for any scale-up workers they employ, although they are not required to do so. If that worker is not eligible to extend or settle, this could lead to disruption in the work authorisation. It remains to be seen what impact this group of workers will have on the UK labour force. There are some good points to it, however it is a little bit complicated, and whether this route will really benefit sponsors and whether workers will actually bother to apply or stay with their sponsors for more than the 6-month period. This has been a very long video, so it is a good news story, but it is a good news story that is fairly complex, and you will probably need the advice of a reputable immigration advisor if you are thinking of either applying for a scale-up visa from abroad, sponsored or unsponsored, or you're thinking of switching into a scale-up visa from in the United Kingdom. If I can help at all, if you bother to stay awake to get to the end of this long video, but I thought it merited it, then please get in touch with me and I'll do my level best to help you. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay safe. Please subscribe to my channel. This is Paul Turner, the Immigration Barrister at Imperium Chambers.